Thank you, Dr. Surajit Ray, and thank you all of you for joining today, the audience, the organizers. With your nice and kind words, the kind of introduction given by Dr. Jayashree Chakraborty and also Dr. Shubhra Ghosh. So the way you set the platform, as if like there are lots of expectations. So I think I will try to do the justice to some extent. Academics to some extent is all about, as you know that, as Dr. Shubhra Ghosh talked about, communication is a kind of interchange. It's a kind of cooperation going on, between the speaker and the listener. So we need to reach out to people for that matter, you see. So I'm here in a university, JNU, you're somewhere in Northeast India, in Assam, and so we need to reach out, So university and colleges, there has to be, so whatever the gaps have been created, we need to bridge the gap, kind of reduce the gap. So thank you once again, all of you, those who have invited. Thank you. So the chief patron of this one-day webinar, Honorable Shri Dr. Pegu sir, Deputy Commissioner. So he could not join. Maybe he will join little late. Thank you, sir, for hosting this one-day webinar. And principals, Madam and Sir, Dr. Jayashree Chakraborty, Pandit Dindayal Upadhyaya Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, and Dr. Preston Daimari, Principal of Tangla College, and the convener, Dr. Surajit Ray, thank you. And the topic which is being selected, so there are lots of discussion and deliberation, because the way we are thinking, how to go about it, since my experience of teaching is mainly, MA and PhD students. And since you are in college, so I thought of selecting a topic where I can connect with you, so with the teachers and with the students as well. So that was the main understanding. So I put, so after lots of deliberation and discussion, we come to this topic. So hope, as I already told you, that I can do justice to this topic as well. Okay. So thank you, convener, both the convener, Dr. Surajit Ray, and Dr. Shubhra Ghosh ma'am, with your kind and beautiful words, and the joint coordinators, as I can see, Dr. Narayan Gahat Raj. So thank you, sir. I can see that you are passionate, with patience, you are listening to all of us, and thank you. And Dr. Devoshi Borkotaki, again Assistant Professor from Pandit Dindayal Upadhyaya Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, and the organizing committee, and the colleagues. I know that there are many colleagues, some students and friends, newcomers, for some of you, maybe linguistics is the new subject, So thank you, all of you. So with your, and today is the auspicious day, and that's what the idea that, okay, why not have this webinar, this Wednesday. That's what Surajit had told me that, okay, so we decided this day. So my pranam, my namaskar to Shankardeva, and I also come from that place. Basically, I come from Kuch Bihar. So talking about Assam and Kuch Bihar, as you know, that there is lots of similarities, Instead of differences, there are lots of similarities, talking about the cultural aspect and all. So thank you, all of you, for joining today. So before, let's say, so I won't take too much time, talking about the introduction part and the welcome part. So I'll share my screen. So I prepared a PPT, PowerPoint presentations, and I already told Dr. Surajit Ray that for this talk, at least I need 1.5 hours. Let's say more than 1 hour. So after one hour, more than 1 hour, and then we have whatever the doubts, questions, queries, if you have in your mind, please do ask me. Okay. So because academics is all about kind of interchange, kind of exchange of ideas and thoughts. So do not keep things in your mind. Please do ask, and if there is time, there is no time. So you can also direct those questions to to my email ID. Okay. So with that few words, so thank you once again. Let me share my screen. Okay. Surajit sir, is this visible? My screen, is this visible to all of Narayan sir? Is this visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
It is visible. Right.
Okay. So thank you once again. So welcome to you, all of you, to one day national webinar organized by Department of English and as Pandit Dindayal Upadhyaya Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, as well as by Department of English, Tangla College. And you heard about the topic, the lecture topic today, that bridging the gap for effective communications, perspective from linguistics and language sciences. Okay, so this is I'll be talking about how to bridge the gap, how to reduce the gap for effective communications, for successful communications. Okay, so this is so myself, as Dr. Surajit Ray has already given the introduction. So anyway, so I teach linguistics and linguistics in the department Center for Linguistics, JNU, for many years, more than 12 or 13 years. Okay, so and mostly those who are joining, let's say you are from Department of English, in my understanding, and also maybe kind of literature background and all. Okay, so that was the idea, that to select a topic so that we can kind of exchange our ideas and all. Okay, so so what is the overview of my talk today, and what I'm going to talk about, the kind of perspective from linguistics and language sciences. So so this is where mainly, in the introduction part, I'll be talking about linguistics. What is linguistics? What do you do in linguistics? What kind of, let's say, what kind of areas we look into? What is language, let's say? So briefly, maybe 5 minutes I'll talk about this part. And then in linguistics, the kind of linguistic study, so, and mainly for communication, let's say. So these are the things we need to know. That one is talking about the concept like competence. So the competence, the concept which is proposed by Noam Chomsky, you must have heard about Noam Chomsky, and then the competence concept, which was again extended by Delheim's, communicative competence, and then later on again this concept was extended by Bhatia, discursive competence. So briefly, I'll talk about that, and especially for effective communications, we need to have this kind of competence. Okay, so this is where, and especially in linguistic study, we have different schools. One is the formalist school and the functionalist school. And the functionalist schools, mainly today we are in the functionalist schools, not in the formalist schools. So not too much into theory, but rather in the applications. Okay, so this is now language teaching. Try to remember, when you are teaching a second language, whichever the second language is, so it could be second language English, it could be, let's say, Bangla, it could be whichever the second language we're talking about. Let's say you are learning a new language, So when we were learning a new language, for that matter, so what happens is that, you see, the course is designed in such a way that always somewhere we are going to look at 4 skills. So one skill is that speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So 4 skills are always tested, let's say. Okay, so briefly talk about the 4 skills and communication. What is communication? What types of communication strategies we need? Dr. Shubhra Ghosh always talked about the communication part little bit, the kind of communication change. Language is the means of communications. We always exchange our ideas, thoughts, emotions, and all she was talking about. So pretty good, So what is communication and the kind of communication strategies I'll be talking about, and then and let's say, especially when you talk about communication, and one thing is that you need to know the language, that whatever the grammatical rules of the language. In addition to the grammatical rules of the language, there are other things. Let's say the cultural aspects of the language, So these are also really important. So those cultural aspects, what we call the interdisciplinary area here in linguistics, what is sociolinguistics and pragmatics, So there, so I'll little bit to talk about what are the linguistic theoretical things, So the speech act, the felicity and gratis maxims. So these are the heavy loaded terms, let's say for you, but I'll try to make it very, very simple for you so that you can easily understand, So this is where, and teaching of second language, so when you see the second language teaching started and there are different kind of teaching methods. You must have heard about grammar translation method, audiolingual method, direct method. There are different types of language teaching methods. And then somewhere in the 1970s, the methods like communicative language teaching methods came into picture. So why this communicative language teaching methods, you see? So, and mostly in different departments now, people are adopting these methods, communicative language teaching methods. Okay, so so we'll talk about those communicative language teaching methods, and really it is to some extent really successful method of language teaching for that matter. Okay, so this is and then and what are the factors involved in communication or communication strategies? Briefly talk about that and how to bridge the gap. So whatever the gaps, linguistic gap or the cultural gap we are talking about. So how to bridge that gap, and then what kind of lessons we can learn from linguistics and language sciences, and finally the observation and conclusion. Okay, this is my kind of brief overview of my talk, and let's say I'm hopeful that within 1.5 hours I will to complete my topic and the talk as well. Okay, and after that we can have interactions and all. Okay, so and as I already told you that even if you have doubts, queries and all, you can reach me at my email ID hmray@jnu.ac.in. Okay, so now let's since many of you joining for the first time maybe must not heard about what is linguistics, let's say. So we know that what is linguistics. I'll not so linguistics is basically, as you know, that's a scientific study of language or languages, or for that matter we talk about human languages, so not other languages, because so mainly human languages, you see, and scientific study. So we look at language, so it could be any languages in the world for that matter, you see. So at present there are more than 6,000 languages in the world, and so linguist, whoever is a linguist, he or she can study any languages in the world for that matter. Okay, so because we follow the scientific methods and all. Myself, let's say, conducted many field works in different Indian languages in different parts and nook and corner of the country. So linguist can study any language for that matter. Okay, and people may question that linguistics, is it a science? Then we definitely say that yes, linguistics is a science, because even in science, we have that kind of, method or procedures, how do you conduct your research, gather and observe data. Then after that, you make kind of generalization and then develop a kind of hypothesis. And from that hypothesis, if hypothesis is tested against more data, it becomes a theory for that matter, you see. So in linguistics and other social science research also, many people based on inductive generalization so linguistics is definitely science that can be debated and discussed and all, but linguistics is definitely, it's a science. Okay, so and now these are the areas of linguistics. There are different areas of linguistics. There are core areas, as I already mentioned, like kind of phonetics, phonology, and morphology, syntax, semantics, and these are the core areas. So let's say try to understand that if you're learning a second language, whichever the second language, whether it's English or French, German, Japanese, Korean, whichever the second language for that matter, you need to know it very well, phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, and grammar of those languages, because this is the structural part of the language I'm talking about, the grammatical aspect, the rules of the language for that matter. Okay, and then within linguistics, the kind of interdisciplinary branches like, let's say, pragmatics, discourse analysis. I do teach even pragmatics and discourse analysis. Even to some extent, graphology, scripts and writing systems also is also being discussed. So and other branches. There are many other branches. Historical linguistics mainly look at the language origin, its history and all, social linguistics, computational linguistics, very emerging field nowadays, anthropological linguistics, stylistics. I myself teach stylistics, language of literature for that matter, you see, and lexicography, how to make a dictionary, whether it's a monolingual dictionary, bilingual dictionary, multilingual dictionary and all that. Neurolinguistics, what is happening in our neurons, in our brain, mind or brain, so we do that kind of fMRI study, so what kind of processing is going on, what kind of cognition is going on, psycholinguistics, applied linguistics. Again, applied linguistics covers many things, ethnolinguistics, forensic linguistics, corpus linguistics, field linguistics. There are many interdisciplinary branches are there in linguistics as well, okay? So the students who would be in future interested, let's say, you can keep your eye, and start reading related to the areas and all, okay? Now, linguistics, as I already mentioned, that linguistics is a scientific study of language. Then the question is, what is language? We all know what is language. And Dr. Shubhra Ghosh already said that language is a means of communication. Definitely. We communicate through language, We communicate through language. So language is a means of communication. It's a vehicle for thoughts and ideas. Definitely, it's a vehicle for thoughts and ideas. Which were the thoughts coming in my mind, I am expressing by language for that matter, you see. So language is a vehicle for thoughts and ideas. It's a mode of literary expression for that matter. You are mostly students of literature. Definitely is a mode of literary expression. Gift to human beings. Yes, try to understand that's a gift to human beings in compared to other communication system. Let's say bonobo, chimpanzees, gorillas or monkeys for that matter. And our communication system, which is language, is totally, advanced communication system. So this definitely is a gift to human beings, and so language, so part of language is mainly talk. Some people call it language is talk. Language is the source of human life and power. Yes, to some extent, because of language is the source of human life and power. That's what. And the philosopher Wittgenstein says that the limitations of language is the limitation of my power. Try to understand that limitations of my language, the limitations. So, so languages factor in nation building, state formation. In India, also, if you look at somehow states are formed on the basis of language. Many states are formed on the basis of language, and also there are many nations which are formed on the basis of language. For that matter, Bangladesh. Let's say Bangladesh was created somewhere, formed in 1971, and the idea was also because of Bangladesh was created. So there are many states which are formed on the basis of language, and it's also language is a matter of political controversy. Try to understand that, So whether if something like mother tongue, government is not recognizing the mother tongue of X language for that matter. So there are maybe a group of people that demanding that particular language, the inclusion, let's say, in the 8th schedule for that matter, in the primary school curriculum or maybe in the secondary school curriculum. And there are many other things we know that language is a matter of political controversy as well, So there are many other aspects. Language is uniquely specific. And that's what I told you, that if you compare the animal communication system with the human communication system, is definitely unique and specific. And there is a gene, what do you call that, FOXP2 gene, which is found in human, So somehow it is unique and specific. Try to understand that. It's totally advanced communication system, you see. So that's what Chomsky, one of the leading thinker of this 21st century, the intellect, Noam Chomsky, says that when you study human language, we're approaching what some might call human essence, the distinctive qualities of mind that is so unique to man. Unique to man. Man means basically humans, is not okay. So this is where, and also the kind of he says that language is finite or infinite list of sentences produced by finite set of rules. Okay, so this is. So now, and language is also a social institution. Let's say Assam, Assamese, because of, let's say, you speak Assamese, there is a kind of social institution. Bangla, Bengali, Rajbangshi for that matter, even if you look at. So it's a kind of social institution. It's socially bounded by language as well at the same time. This is where Suniti Kumar Chattopadhyay, I think most of you can read this script, Bangla script, and that's what the definition, Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, মনের ভাব প্রকাশের জন্য বাকযন্ত্রের সাহায্যে উচ্চারিত ধ্বনি দ্বারা কোনো বিশেষ জনসমাজে ব্যবহৃত স্বতন্ত্রভাবে অবস্থিত তথা বাক্য সমষ্টিকে ভাষা বলে। See, that's what the definition Suniti Kumar Chattopadhyay. So this is where And there are different kind of definitions. So I don't want to delve into the definition part, but Edward Sapir, one of the leading structuralist linguist, so language is purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by voluntarily produce symbols. That's again communication parts coming into picture. Language is system arbitrary symbols by means of a social group cooperates. The social group, whichever the social group we're talking about, they cooperate. Okay, so language is an institution whereby humans communicate and interact with each other by means of habitually used oral auditory symbols. This is where some of the definitions I wanted to get some of the definitions, and then try to understand this. So the main understanding of language is something like, so now let's say, try to understand that. Let's say if I say I know a language for that matter. So what do I mean if I say that I know a language? Let's say I know Assamese, or I know Bangla, or I know Rajbangshi. So knowing a language means that let's say to some extent, the phonetics of the language, how the words are pronounced, how the sentences are formed, let's say. So the phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics of those languages as well, you see. So this is where really interesting, So what do you know when you know a language? And so native speakers' insight and fluency. Always try to look at native speakers' insight and fluency. Insight, mainly talking about the intuition part. We'll talk about the intuition later on here, intuition and competence here. Native speakers' insight and fluency. Ability to produce sentences with no grammatical errors. Mainly if you're a native speaker, you will see that people do not commit mistakes. They do not make grammatical errors for that matter. If you're second language learners, then you may commit kind of, grammatical errors and all. So capacity to write elegantly or expressively. So this part, this capacity to write is not the essential part. It is the secondary part. Because when you talk about language, mainly we are focusing on the spoken language. And when you talk about written language, it's the secondary part. There are many people, let's say, in the world, they do not know how to read and write, but they know how, they know how to speak the language, you see. So, but especially in the second language, if we're talking about second language teaching or second language learning, as I told you that 4 skills, the writing and reading is also taught, you see. So, but linguistic understanding, knowing a language, something like you need to know the phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and not only that, also the pragmatics. So the contextual use of that particular language, you see. So briefly today I'll talk about that part when you talk about communication, effective communication. So not only the structural rules or grammatical rules you need to know, but at the same time the pragmatics, the context, the social factors also you need to know when you. So, and this is where, and mainly, maybe the generation before, let's say 1980s, 1970s, what happened, mostly people are trained by grammar translation method. So grammar translation method, what happened, so the grammatical rules were introduced to the students. And let's say after successful training of more than 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, the students or the learners are not able to speak the language, That's what exactly happened. Many people, they know how to read and write, but they do not know how to speak fluently. Because the grammar translation method, there are some kind of problems with the grammar translation methods. In Assam also, you will see that there are many people, they know how to read and write English for that matter. But when it comes to speaking, there are lots of problems, So the problem with the grammar translation method, and someone knows the rules of the language, they know the rules of the language, but they are not successful communicators, And the problem lies with the grammar translation method of teaching as well, you see. So that's what, so there are things like, let's say, it's not only the grammar, beyond the grammars, there are, let's say, some idioms, proverbs, collocations, cliches, there are many other things, we need to know of this language. And the grammatical rules are not, you will not find the grammatical rules there. Because if you say it is raining cats and dogs, there is no cat, there is no dogs. If you say it. So you need to know these things, especially in English, this is the kind of idioms, idiomatic. So every language has that kind of idioms and proverbs. So if you want to communicate effectively, so at the same time, you need to know those other aspects of the language, you see. So here, that the frozen kind of things. These are frozen things, idioms and fixed expressions. These are frozen items and all. Okay. So cultural norms of the society. What kind of cultural norms? This Assamese culture is different from Bangla culture. Bangla culture is different from Hindi culture. At the same time, English culture. So let's say in one particular culture, to say yes, they are simply shaking their heads, something like this. South India people do it. And in our culture, if you're shaking their heads as if like it is basically no. Try to understand that, you need to look at that kind of things, shaking their heads instead of nodding. So nodding is basically yes. And if you say this, it is no. So different culture, this shaking heads, yes, no, it's different, So you need to learn that kind of things. So knowing the grammar and vocabulary of the language and effectively communicate involves other types of knowledge and ability. So it's not only the grammar and vocabulary of the language, so you have other types of ability as well, let's say. So some of the things I just mentioned about. Let's say someone bought a dictionary, or maybe someone bought a English Ray Martin's grammar book. He just learned or memorized the whole things. Do you think that he learned English language? Because he doesn't know the cultural aspect. There are many other things. So knowing the grammatical rules and the vocabulary of the language does not guarantee that you know the language, okay? So there are many other things, okay, at the same time, okay? So as I mentioned that, especially in linguistics, there are two types of study, especially two types of schools. One is formalist school and another is functionalist school, okay? And formalist look at the language structure, the grammatical rules, and some people, many teachers, they know that this is the person Ferdinand de Saussure. This is father of linguistics, 1916, a course in general linguistics, and so from there, linguistics started, growing, especially in USA and in Europe as well, So this Saussure and so he introduced different kind of science, especially kind of linguistics kind of terms for that matter. Science, signified, lang and parole, synchrony versus diachrony, speech versus, and so I'm not going to talk about that, but mainly somewhere, as I told you, that somehow earlier before Saussure, what was happening, that people are focusing on the written language more. But later on, after 1916 and all, so that tradition was gradually shifting to spoken language, So there is a paradigm shift was going on, especially in linguistics and other social science disciplines as well, okay? So this is the point I wanted to focus on. And so these are some of the relevant concepts. And then related to linguistics, and this is the concept which is really important concept, what we talk about, Chomsky, 1957, syntactic structures, and there are subsequent publications, standard theory, extended standard theory, and there are many others. So he talked about the kind of difference between competence and performance. Competence is basically what we know. So that basically the linguistic rules which is there in our mind or in our brain. Performance is basically the performance factor, what you perform in. So he says that competence is basically there. The children or the speakers, they do have the competence. It is inbuilt. It is inbuilt. Being a human, you have the competence for that matter. Let's say you speak Assamese, so you have the competence because Assamese is your first language. Okay, so you know that somebody is making a mistake, whether it's a pronunciation level mistakes or whether it's a grammatical level mistakes, you can understand. Let's say I know how to, let's say, I can understand fully Assamese, but talking about when it comes to speaking, I have little difficulty. I speak also Assamese, but let's say I'm making kind of mistakes, you'll easily know that, okay, what kind of levels of mistakes I'm making, whether it's the pronunciation level or in the grammatical level or not. You may not explain these things in detail, but you know it subconsciously. There are some kind of problems, okay? So that's what Chomsky talked about, that kind of competence, So, and then Chomsky later on, he shifted the entire discipline, especially linguistics and social science, psychology and all. The earlier understanding, mainly language was perceived as a kind of set of behaviors. Behavior as if like you are riding a kind of bicycle or maybe swimming or something, as if like language can be learned, But it's a totally different thing. This language is acquired basically, because of human language capacity or the kind of universal grammar what is there we have in our mind or brain. So this is where Chomsky's contribution came into picture, and still the kind of hypothesis what Chomsky proposed, still it's very difficult to challenge, his views and all, So and, anyway, so this is where and then competence, mainly looking at the linguistic structure, Chomsky says, and then after Chomsky, 1970, this mainly Delheims talked about communicative competence. He says that it's not only competence, what you know, but the communicative competence does matter, you see. So, and that's what, so I'll talk about that competence and as well as communicative competence. Now, the linguistic competence, as I told you that Chomsky's publication 1957, 65, 1980, 95, even 2001. So all this, so what is competence? Basically, what do we know about a particular language? And so it's something like innate, genetically determined feature of human species, something which is there, And we are born with this considerable pre-programmed knowledge how language works and require minimal exposure. Try to understand that anyone who is born in a particular community, whether it's the Assamese community or a Bengali community, nobody teaches him or her language. The child, because there is exposure, he or she will definitely learn or acquire that particular language, So there is minimal exposure, and the child after 4 years or 5 years, he will definitely speak the language of his community, So we are born with that kind of, so what Chomsky calls the universal grammar, and that's what the UG, universal grammar, okay. So this is where, now, so the notion of communicative competence introduced by Delheims and extended, let's say, the notion of competence extended by Delheims here, and so he says that a person who has only, and a person who has only linguistic competence would be quite unable to communicate. Let's say you only know the rules of that particular grammatical rules of that language, and you do not know the social, there are many other social structure, the kind of rules of that particular community. So he or she would be considered as kind of linguistic monster, producing grammatical sentences unconnected to the situation and context. So we have to speak related to the context, not out of the context. There are many grammatical sentences we can speak, but it has to be contextually valid for that matter. Okay, so this is where, what is needed for successful communication? So Delheims, he suggested 4 types of knowledge. And this is, one is possibility, and then there's feasibility, appropriateness, and attestedness. So Delheims 1970 suggested these 4 types of knowledge. So possibility. So you need to understand that if you want to communicate effectively, so these 4 you should know. So let me just discuss these 4 things. So one is possibility. So possibility for Delheims is that a competent speaker knows what is formally possible in a language, what is formally possible and what is not possible for that matter. So what kind of grammatical rules are there, how a particular word has to be pronounced and all. So the speaker, competent speaker, he knows it, you see. And so let's say something like in English, if somebody says, me go cook now. So you know that this is an ungrammatical sentence. We have to say, I am going to cook now. So another way. So the competent speaker knows the grammar. So possibility, what is possible and what is not possible. And also she or he knows the rules, or capable of following them, break them and deliberately. Even he knows how to break the rules also. Competent speaker, and mainly you see that there are many people at times they violate the kind of linguistic rules. And you will see that many writers, even creative writers, even in the songs also, even in the poetry, in the poems also, you will see that there are many people who are writing. I do also write in Rajvanshi. So you will see that they violate the rules of the particular language, you see. So they know what is possible and what is not possible, and at the same time, they can kind of manipulate with the structure of that particular language, you see. So this is where possibility, we have to know about the possibility. Feasibility. feasibility. So you need to know what is feasible and what is not feasible, and what can be processed by the mind or what cannot be processed by the mind. And because language is not something like you're playing a game of words. No. So our idea is that to some extent we try to communicate effectively and try to make our information easily accessible to others. I'm trying to communicate with you. So my main idea is that so that I can communicate with you whatever I'm saying, so that maybe you can understand also. Okay, so this is feasible. It has to be feasible. But you see, somewhere what happens, there are many places, some kind of documents, policy documents. You will see that the kind of language is used, whether it's LIC policy documents and other kind of policy documents, also legal documents. At times, you know the language, it's very difficult to digest, it's very difficult to comprehend those documents and all, because it is not, to some extent, not feasible for the speakers of those particular language. So we suggest that that somewhere even the policy documents or some legal documents has to be made feasible for the normal speakers to some extent. Okay, so this is where our suggestion from Applied Linguistics, and also Delheim suggests this thing, and so something like feasible, let's say briefly I can tell you that what is feasible. Let's say I can say I saw the cat, and then the next one, I saw the cat which was sitting on the mat, and then let's say you continue the sentence, the mat which was in my house, and my house is in let's say in Assam, and then you keep on going on and on, and at times it's very difficult to process these things by the mind, it's very difficult, so, and somewhere let's say the word prepone or post-war in another way, prepone and post-war, and if I continues, okay, prepone this. So how many pre are there? How many times? Or post. Many times I'm using the word post. So you are confused. It's very difficult to process by the mind. You see. So that's the kind. So one of the aspects what Delheim was talking about, the feasibility. So we need to adhere to the principle of feasibility when we are talking about language. Another thing we talk about appropriateness. So what is this appropriateness? And language and context, basically we are talking about pragmatics here. And so we need to know what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. So let's say, especially, and many Indian languages, we have this I, moi or mui, and you, let's say, you. And mainly Indian languages, you have three-way distinctions, tu, man, aap in Hindi. In Bangla also, tui, tumi, apni. Also in Assamese also there are three-way distinctions. You see that. So try to understand that. Let's say it's your teacher or any elder person, and you are addressing that elder person as tui. So it is not appropriate. Basically, it is inappropriate. Okay, and you are writing a formal letter, and in that formal letter, there are kind of taboo or slang words are there. So you need to know that, what is appropriate. Maybe in a letter you are writing or chatting with your friend, that is okay. One taboo or slang words are fine. But if it is a formal letter, you have to follow certain things, you see. And respect to elderly people. Different cultures, definitely we respect our elders and all elderly people. So, tui, tumi, apni in Bangla, so mainly elderly people, mostly we say apni, in your language also, okay? And so that kind of social convention we have, we try to adhere to the social convention of that particular language. So as I told you, so if you try to communicate effectively, it is not only the linguistic structures, at the same time, beyond the linguistic structures, you have this context and what you call pragmatics to some extent. Even dressing sense. Dressing sense really matters. Let's say you are in a rural place, whichever the rural place, whether it's in Assam, whether it's in Rajasthan or in Haryana and all. So dressing sense, so to some extent you need to conform to the social convention, and accordingly you need to wear also dresses. Because why I'm saying this thing, because I keep on traveling in different places to conduct field work, and so I always tell our students that, okay, try to wear decent kind of clothes, especially in the village setting. Maybe in the rural setting it's a different thing, So there are many things we need to know, dressing sense also tells you lots of things, So language for that matter, so even talking about English for that matter. So the English we speak, it's different kind of English. It's not the British English or the American English. Japanese speakers, they use different kind of English for that matter. Arabic speakers, they have different kind of English, and alongside English, they have their own cultural norms for that matter. So Japanese politeness. So in Japanese, there are lots of politeness strategies are there. You must have seen in a movie that somehow Japanese many times they're just nodding their head, and not only the head, the entire body. And Arabic speakers, many Muslim speakers, they say, even when they speak English, inshallah, inshallah, many times they may say this word, inshallah. And also in Indian English for that matter, there are lots of code mixing and code switching are going on. So English is basically different, It's not the American English or the British English. We speak our own English. Try to understand that. So the main idea is that, yeah, even if we speak Indian English, how to communicate effectively. That is the main point, okay? So now, so this is where try to understand this, that language creates our identities and allows us to communicate with others. So creates our identities. So whichever the place you come from, so there is an identity. You cannot hide your identity. And so our understanding here is that we try to negotiate the parameters of difference and conformity. So what are the parameters so that makes us different, and maybe what are the parameters so that we can be more similar, to the standard variety or something. So we try to negotiate that. So especially speaking English, so we try to neutralize our accent, let's say, to some extent, so that we do not sound typical Indian speakers for that matter, you see. So that even the US speakers or Britishers also, they can understand us. So this is where we need to negotiate our differences and conformity. Okay. So this is where and the four principles what Himes was talking about 1970 with us, and this is where attestedness. So something, let's say you are learning the language and you're trying to create a sentence. So whether the sentence is right or not, so he says that at least whether the sentence is right or not. So is there any evidence for that? Is it well attested? Now, if you look at this sentence like I am loving it, if you go by the standard English, this is the ungrammatical sentence, because the verb love, you cannot make it progressive. Okay. But what happened in India, this progressive is so random, So as a result, what happened, Indian English variety, I am loving is like, it's a common expression. And somehow, now it is well attested. The McDonald's brand, you'll see that I am loving it. I am loving, there is a brand, So something like then, and it is accepted by the Britishers as well as the Americans. I am loving that kind of. So Delheim says that if there is some kind of structure you do have, so whether those structures are well attested or not. If it is well attested, then maybe you can use that structure as well. So no problem with that. Okay. So as I told you that Indian English itself, there are lots of varieties within Indian English. Even if you talk about Bengali English, Benglish, let's say Assamese English is different, let's say. And I'm telling you that because in JNU there are many people, many students come from different nook and corner of the country, and also not only the country, from other places also. So the kind of English we speak, for that matter, we speak different kind of English. So Punjabi, let's say, the kind of Panglish and Tamilish, Manglish, and all that kind of, different kind of, so we have different kind of, the way we use English, So varieties of Indian English, there are lots of varieties within Indian English. Try to understand that. Even South India, English is spoken different way, So one of the structure I'm just trying to give you, and mostly it is accepted in Indian English. So what we are going to do in American variety or British variety or the standard English, what are we going to do? The auxiliary will come before the pronoun here, the subject here. So, but this is accepted in Indian English, and many of us do use this kind of structure. So let's say I want to ask a question. This is your bag. So mainly, is this your bag in American variety or British variety? many of us, let's say, we want to make it a question mark or interrogative sentence. What do you say? This is your bag. This is your bag. So, kind of elongated kind of intonation. Raise the intonation, the tone for that matter. So, we make it an interrogative sentence. So, how are you doing here? Especially in Hindi belt. How are you doing here? And how are you doing, buddy? Let's say, mainly in English, so using this American variety or something. So AR is very common in Indian English. There are many, lots of examples. G, especially. I will write the email. Let's say, yes, instead of to. Even this the word to. I think in Assamese also maybe it is used. To what I am doing again. To is frequently used. To kind of so. And what is your good name? And for your understanding, good name mainly in American variety or British variety, nobody uses that. What is your good name? But in our variety, Indian variety, many people they say, what is your good name? And also when they introduce that myself, let's say myself, Madhab Ray. Especially in standard English, nobody will say myself. They will say I, Madhab Ray, or I. So I'm Madhab Ray. So, but in Indian English, you must heard about this. Many people they introduce that myself, Madhav, myself, this and that. You see, so this is where the kind of Indian English and the kind of variety. There are lots of things I can talk about Indian English, but so what I was saying, try to understand that I was talking about competence or communicative competence, and what happened. You see, the kind of the idea which was proposed by Delheims and later on, after 1970s, there is a lots of influence of communicative competence, and also earlier what happened, we have that grammar translation method of teaching, and now it is changing. People trying to adopt communicative method of language teaching after 1970s. Try to understand that. You see, earlier it was grammar translation method. The main aim was not to, let's say, speak the language, but rather how to read and write the language. But the focus is changing now, after 1970s. And this is where, and the communicative competence, the theory which was proposed by Delheims, and it has huge impact on different disciplines, in interdiscipline, discipline, translation studies, speech theory, information design, and there are many others. The huge impact, and as well as in the second language teaching, as I was talking about, because this is the linguistic concept, communicative competence, okay, and huge impact on teaching of English as a foreign or second language, or whichever the second language we are talking about, whether it's Assamese, Bangla, Hebrew, whichever the language for that matter, okay. So our understanding here, the aim was to develop learners' capacity to use the language effectively. So this is where the learners should use the language effectively, okay. So this is where communicative language teaching. So within this communicative language teaching, later on, Bhatia, it's a recent development and all, he talks about this not only the communicative competence, we need to go, let's say, one or two steps ahead or far. So we need to have discursive competence. So what is the discursive competence? Really interesting, Discursive competence draws together the notions of textual competence, generic competence, and social competence. So you have to have textual competence, generic competence, and social competence. Then you can communicate effectively. Otherwise, it's like textual competence. What is this textual competence? Textual competence refers to the ability to produce and interpret contextually appropriate text. So I'm, let's say, contextually producing appropriate text. Let's say how people use the internet to communicate with each other. Internet thing, you need to know that, what kind of language is being used in the internet. Even, let's say, there are lots of abbreviations. Abbreviations, you understand that all that abbreviations, Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, Trinamool Congress, TMC, all these abbreviations. Emoticons, there are many emoticons, symbols, punctuations, conventions. There are many things are there. So you need to know all those things. So that's the textual competence. And the generic competence, how we're able to respond to both recurring and new communicative situations by constructing, interpreting, using, and exploiting conventions associated with the use of particular kinds of text or genre. So we know it, the kind of general kind of things. And also, let's say, sending an email to a colleague or sending a text message to a friend. We know that. So if you are sending an email, it's a very formal kind of setting. But the same thing, if you're sending a text message, it may not be formal. Let's say WhatsApp messages. WhatsApp messages, mainly it's not formal, mainly it is considered, still many people, they consider it informal. But email is considered to be kind of formal, and also we write the kind of application, let's say whether it's your job application for your joining or cancelling your leave or something. It is definitely, it has to be formal. So we all know it, in which context, what to write, what not to write, and all. Okay, so this is discursive competence, what Bhatia was talking about. Okay, and the social competence at the same time, social competence like how we use language to take part in social and institutional interactions in a way that enables us to express our social identity. So let's say some people, you will see that, especially if there is a meeting going on, so they talk a lot, or always say certain things. Or whether you are in charge of the meeting or attending the meeting, what kind of use of language and what is your role also, whether you are participant or whether you are boss, whether it's the principal or you are a student or you are teacher. Looking at that also, you have different kind of roles. Let's say if you are a principal for that matter, you have a different kind of role. If you are a teacher, you have a different kind of role. If you are a student, you have a different kind of role, and so you know that. So you have to behave accordingly. So it's not like that, okay, I know the grammatical rules and the structure of the language, I can say anything. No. So the social things, so that's also important. Okay. So Deske Bhatia talks about this, and discursive competence not only includes language related and text level knowledge, but also includes complex factors outside the text. So it's not only the text, but there are some complex factors outside the text. Let's say messenger, WhatsApp messenger, Facebook messenger, you need to know this, technology, the kind of technology today we are tuned with, so you need to know the technology and how much you know about, let's say. So let's say this meeting is going on in the Zoom platform here, and let's say you bought a phone, Apple phone, iPhone, or maybe iPad, or let's MacBook, whichever you do have, and just you bought it, but you do not know how to use it. So what is the need of it? So you need to know all that kind of things, So you have to have that kind of discursive competence, So use of software for that matter. So whether you are using Windows or Mac and some other things. So these are other things not related to language, outside the language, So include complex factors outside the text. So these are also important for communication. Try to understand that, So that's what Bhatia 2004 talks about this. Okay. So now coming back to my third topic today, within that, so language teaching and the 4 skills, as I was talking about, so speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So when you're talking about language teaching, so always we concentrate on these 4 skills: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So try to understand that. So what is the nature of the skills? So whether I'm just simply speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and we always test this. Let's say whether a particular student or learner is good or bad. So it depends on that. So we test on these different levels, let's say. And now just try to look at that. So somewhere oral medium, this is the oral medium. So productive, active speaking and writing, both is considered to be productive. Receptive or passive, listening and reading is passive to some extent. Oral medium, mainly hearing and speaking. Visual medium, yes, definitely visual medium, writing and reading. So this is where you look at the chart, and you will see that, understand that, you see. And speaking, when you talk about speaking, definitely spoken language, and so the kind of notions when you talk about spoken language, so the kind of say, okay, the clarity should be there. So he speaks clearly, he speaks correctly. Also the grammatical system, you should know the grammatical system also. And as I told you, that speaking is also part of reciprocal exchange. There is exchange going on. So you are speaking, at the same time you are listening. Try to understand that, especially in the conversation, it's not one-sided, it's both-sided, you see, speaker and listener. So it involves receptive and productive participation both, okay? So speaking also involves, and also it's not only that, it also paralinguistic features. So non-vocal is not only what I'm saying, at the same time, let's say my gesture, the hand movements of my muscle, face, eyebrows, at the times the whole body also. How am I standing? So all these paralinguistic features also important. It's also important. Try to understand that. And so somehow speaking is also classified as talking or saying or speaking, and so that's again productive, deceptive talking, saying and listening. But if you talk about speaking, talking is basically the higher level, at the advanced level, because but speaking to some extent, yeah, maybe just you were simply speaking, and but talking is more like in the advanced level, So one must, so especially in this language teaching courses, so one must spend time on teaching of speaking and hearing first, and then slowly and moving to the higher level of communicative ability, talking. Because talking involves many more things, you see. Speaking, you can speak alone also, that's okay. But when it comes to talking also, it's a high level communicative ability, okay. So this is where our understanding. And the writing and reading also is related to writing and reading. So the main idea is that, so we need to focus on that the kind of skills, 4 skills we're talking about, okay. And now language and communication, related to language and communications, and how to bridge the gap for effective communications. And as I already told you, the language has, let's say, to some extent form, the formal aspects, all the linguistic grammatical aspects, forms, and language another, the functional aspect. The functional aspect is how to communicate, let's say. So language has form as well as language has functions. So our understanding, whether you're linguist or non-linguist, is that the main purpose of the human language is communication, okay. So maybe I was talking about the kind of different, what is language. Then language is many things for that matter, but the main idea of language is to communicate, communication, So, and that's what Dr. Shubhra Ghosh was talking about. Let's say there is no communication. So language is basically kind of a random noises or physical variations in the environment. So let's say I'm talking and I'm not communicating to some extent, you do not understand what I was saying, or simply, let's say nobody is listening, I'm simply shouting for that matter. So it's a random noises, So that's what, so language has a form as well as language has a function. It has to have a function. So communication process, and the word communication, communis, means common. We try to establish some commonness by sharing, exchanging, interacting with others. So communication is a two-way process. So we're sending the signal, the code, there's a medium, the air medium here, and somebody is receiving it. And he's also decoding. So the code is being decoded. And then let's say he or she wants to give feedback. So this is the channel, communication channel is going on. So communication can take place one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, or many-to-many. This is the channel. It can go. And the communicative system. And this is where try to understand that that's what the dyadic context, we always talk about that communication taking place is always I and you context, I and thou context, So there is a speaker or hearer, listener, So I, thou, so whether question, utterance, so there are something vocal. I was talking about the vocal means mainly the linguistics, at times some paralinguistics, and non-vocal, some non-linguistic things are also there, So it could be verbal and non-verbal. Verbal means basically we're speaking, let's say, using the vocal cords for that matter. And the hearer, so the thou answer, and maybe he can give response also. So that's a mediation process going on, intersubjectivity and objectivity and all. So this is where the whole this communication channel looks like this. And so somewhere, so I won't talk about more on the theory and all, but let's say Plato has defined language as an occurring between question and answer. For Saussure, it circumscribes the I and thou perspective, and for Pike, it exists in utterance and responses, And there are, for some people, like language is dialogue rather than a monologue. Language is not a monologue. Language is basically a dialogue, And anyway, in the philosophical traditions, I'll not go into the philosophical traditions. So there are communication types. There are different types of communications. As I already told you, that there's a verbal communications and non-verbal. Non-verbal, the paralinguistic features are being associated, So verbal, the spoken and the written. It could be that, and non-verbal here, like the facial expression, gestures, body language, tone, dressing sense as well, the paralinguistics, the non-verbal things also. So we communicate by that as well. So, and there are a lot of other types of communications also, though. There's online communications, offline communications, internet. Now the communication is going on in this, let's say, internet via this Zoom platform and all. Okay, and so if you want to communicate effectively, the understanding is that you have to, let's say, know the context. The context of utterance can change the meaning. So that the context really plays. So let's say, can you open the window? So it's and if I'm asking someone that can you open the window, it's not I'm asking someone's ability whether he can open the window or not, but rather it's a simple request. The room is very hot. So I'm asking. So he said, okay, I can, and just he's simply sitting there and doing nothing. But he has to open the window because the room is hot, and I forgot the book, let's say, and so depending on different context, the meaning can be different. It's not only I forgot the book. Let's say if a child, a daughter is saying to his to her parents or maybe father that Papa, I forgot the book, and they are going to the school, the Papa is going to give a good scolding that how come you forget the book, and so, and maybe one classmate is saying another classmate that I forgot the book. Maybe he or she doesn't want to give the book. He wants to hide it. Or maybe there are other kind of things, So context really, utterance, context of utterance can change the meaning, And so this knowledge of context or situations, the types of register being used, we need to know that. So we also know, let's say, talking to parents, brother, friend, teacher, so different kind of style, different register, use of different pronominal system, and also grammar changes accordingly. So different kind of, so whether you're talking to your brother, maybe you say tu or tum for that matter, but if it is father for that matter, maybe you are going to use ab, or mother also, whether you are going to ab or tum, it also differs also, different depending on different language, So this is where the interesting thing, so it as well as it changes also. The key context, key aspects of context, and cutting talks about the physical context, social context, and the mental words and the roles of the people involved in the interactions. So these are the situational context. It's also important when you talk about pragmatics, and background knowledge context, cultural knowledge. So background knowledge context, also the cultural knowledge context also, it does matter, and the kind of norms and expectations of the particular discourse community. So let's say in this talk you have particular kind of norms and expectation that he is going to deliver a lecture from JNU. So some kind of an expectation you may have, So background knowledge context, and I also have that kind of background knowledge, about you people also, like what you are doing, So I have also certain kind of expectations, So this is where we know it, So, and the co-textual context, I'm introducing a text, and I also know that whether this text can be understood by the interlocutors, by the audience or not. I also, let's say, and so people know it, and so related to that, speech acts, especially in pragmatics we talk about, and so the literal meaning and the intended meaning. So it is hot in here. Let's say if I say I go to the class and the class is very hot and humid, and I simply say it is hot in here, and the students, one of the students simply open the window or open the door. So the literal meaning is not that, it is something else. We need to understand that. So it's not only referring to the temperature, it's maybe a request to do something, either open the window or turn on the AC or something, So we need to know that. So depending on that, and meaning goes beyond what someone in a literal sense has said. So Austin, talks about three kinds of acts. So one is locutionary act, illocutionary act, and perlocutionary act. So locutionary act is basically the literal meaning, and it's the intended meaning. At times we understand this intended meaning, and then we, so something like it is hot in here, so we understand the intended meaning. Okay, it's a request. Perlocutionary act. So it's a kind of effect on the this utterance has on the thoughts of the actions for the person. So something like someone getting up and opening the window. So that kind of action, So that's the perlocutionary act, So we know all that kind of things. So Austin categorized three kinds of speech acts, and within that, Grice, one of the really important figure in pragmatics, talk about three types of sub-principles of the cooperative principles. See, let's say communication is going on between I and you. So there is a kind of understanding between the speaker and the hearer. And we try to adhere to different kind of maxims principles, let's say. So, and we try to cooperate with one another. Let's say I'm talking here in this class, so you're cooperating to some extent. Let's say nobody is disturbing, not making any noise. So whatever, so we cooperate with one another. And not only that, even in our daily life conversation also we cooperate with another. So maxims of quality, Grice talks about that, maxims of quality and maxims of quantity. What is this maxims of quality? So maxims of quality, let's say, only say what they believe to be true. Let's say I have to say, especially in this class, what I believe to be true. Then that's the thing I am going to say. I'm not going to say what is I don't believe to be true. Maxims of quantity is something as informative as is required. Do not, let's say, talk the same thing again and again. So that's the maximum of quantity. I'll not go into detail of all this. And also maxims of relation, relevant to the interaction, relevant to the topic. Today I'm talking about the bridging the gap for effective communication. So I'm just not talking about stylistics, let's say. So relevant to the interaction of the topic, whatever, And maxims of manner, clear in what we say. We have to be very clear. Don't use some kind of ambiguity, obscurity, or let's say heavy loaded words which is not understood by the interlocutors, by the audience. There is no need of it, So maxims of manner is also important. So Grice introduced that 4 kind of things. So we have to understand all that kind of, So we follow this Grice's maxims. Mostly we do follow Grice's maxims, and at times we also violate Grice's maxims. You see, flout Grice's maxims, violate, and at times there is a kind of overlap between the maxims also. Overlap is that, and because we want to be witty, we want to be creative. At times it happens, We want to be give more information. So at times what happens that we harp up on the same string again and again. It happens, so we follow the maxims. But to communicate effectively, it is better if you put, let's say, follow the Grice's maxims, then it is better, but not necessarily. So teaching of second language and emergence of communicative language teaching approaches, as I already told you that somewhere 1970s, this is where, so D. Wilkins, the kind of notional syllabus which was proposed, and so earlier what happened, grammar translation language teaching method mainly look at the grammatical rules and structure, but now they are mainly looking at the communication. So, and they try to develop the syllabus, design the syllabus as well. So D.A. Wilkins is one of the person, and there are many other people, proponents of this communicative language teaching methods, but something like functional approach to teaching a second language, and so their main understanding is that the communication and sociolinguistic functions of a language that help to achieve an individual communicate effectively. It's not the linguistic structure only, but especially the sociolinguistics functions. As I told you, the pragmatics, other things, So they are giving more focus on this, and accordingly they design the syllabus, and so communicative language function includes both fixed expressions and communicative expressions. As for example, let's say something like hello, good morning, I hope you're feeling better today, hello, I wish I could help you, and you will see that there are many books designed in that manner, especially designed on the basis of this communicative language teaching approaches and all. So, and this is the simple model, and this is Wilkins model. Modality, moral discipline, and evaluation. Based on some of these titles, you have some kind of text, some kinds of lessons are being prepared, argument, rational inquiry and exposition, personal emotions. So how to, let's put personal emotion, expression of personal reaction to events. So you'll find some kind of text are being prepared and all, So emotional relations, interpersonal relations, So depending on this, some of these categories, so they'll try to develop the syllabus and all, So, and again, Finocchiaro's functional categories model, personal model, interpersonal, directive, referential, imaginative, and then somewhere this is where again Van Eyck's imparting and seeking factual information, how you seek factual information, expressing and finding out intellectual attitudes, expressing and finding out about emotional attitudes, expressing and finding out moral attitudes, getting things done, socializing and all, So based on that, they will develop their syllabus and all this. Okay, so the factors which are involved in communications, and as I already told you, some of the factors are involved. the persons or participants involved in the speech act, the kind of speech act as I was telling you, the kind of context for that matter, the place where the communication occurs, where is it occurring? Whether it's a school, it's a home, or it's a playground, the place where the communication occurs, you see, and the time of its occurrence, what time, the topic or activity being discussed, which topic is being discussed. So you need to know all that kind of things, you see, and gap and cultural linguistic gaps. So, and as we know that language differs. Bangla is different from Assamese, Assam is different from Hindi, and same way. And so each language is different. So what happens? Let's see, if you're trying to speak a second language, some of the things it may come to the target language. Let's say I am a speaker of Bangla. When I speak or try to speak Assamese, some of the characteristics of Bangla may come into Assamese, in my Assamese. The same way, let's say, we are speakers of Indian languages. So when you speak English, for that matter, there are so many characteristics, whether phonological, morphological, syntactic characteristics may come into, and not only that, the socio-pragmatic aspect I talked about. So there is a cultural gap. So there are many cultural gaps. Kinship terminology, for that matter, if you talk about uncle, especially in English culture, uncle is fine. But for us, uncle, whether it's a maternal uncle, paternal uncle, and even maternal uncle, paternal uncle, there is a kind of kaka, chacha, whatever, kaka or chacha, So you have elder, younger, youngest. So English, let's say, do not make this kind of distinctions. Talking about the pronominal system, as I told you, you. In English, you have only you, but somewhere tu, tum, and aap. In many languages, you have tu and tum also, in different languages. The kind of kinship terminology I am talking about. See, so barriers to communication or communication gap, the sender may have a problem, as for example, suffering a language disorder. So what could be the barriers? Maybe some people have kind of problem, language disorder, aphasia, dyslexia, or different kind of cognitive disability or learning disability, many people. So that could be the barrier of language, that kind of barriers for communication. And maybe the sender, whatever he is talking, it's not clear when you're explaining the concept, a problem there as well. The language may not be suitable, or a speaker is not effective communicator. So maybe the language which is being used is maybe not suitable, let's say. A speaker is not effective communicator, so that could be the barriers also. Or also maybe the subject matter may be complex to some extent. Why I'm saying is that maybe today the subject I'm talking about, it may be really complex, and the receiver may not ready or does not have required language skill, or there may be external noise, medium, channel and all. Okay, just once again, someone has come, just let me give you, Surajit sir, 1 minute, okay, someone has come, just I need to open the door, okay. Surajit sir, 1 second, okay, give me 1 minute just. I'm sorry for this break. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So there could be external noise, whatever the external noise. Now let's say the barrier for communication. I went out, see people are like maybe listening, or so there could be different kind of barriers for communication. So the idea is that so what is a kind of communication culture gap? So what could be the gap? And so the culture gap. So there are different kind of gap, cultural gap. We had seen that mainly if we're talking about, let's say, from one language to another language, there are lots of cultural gap we have looked into, and so a communication culture gap exists because there is a culture gap and not the other way around. So there is a communication culture gap. Try to understand, because one culture is different from another culture. We're not different because we cannot communicate effectively. We all can communicate effectively. Rather, we encounter difficulties in communicating because we perceive ourselves as being different from another culture. We're different from another culture. That's the problem, you see. And also the kind of philosophical, the kind of understanding, the kind of conventions we do have, as a result, we may also not communicate effectively. So we need to understand people from their perspective as well, you see. So let's say a scientist, he has, let's say, developed something, a fertilizer, and he says that if you use this fertilizer to the farmer, and the production will be really, good. But the farmer is not listening because he has some kind of traditional values. But the capitalist is saying that, okay, why not make a business out of it, So everybody has a different kind of purpose. You see, try to understand that. So this is obviously an extreme culture gap. If you look at this example between the capitalist, technological agriculture, and simple non-profit, unhurried farming, for that matter. Let's say the farmer, they say that, okay, we do not want to use this fertilizer because if you use the fertilizer, maybe the land will be infertile after some years. So it's okay. We do not want that kind of profit. So the understanding is different, you see. But the capitalists have a different kind of understanding. So we need to break, or we need to reduce this cultural gap. So to say that the people have to convince the farmers the same way, especially in the language also. So the teachers and the kind of students, the kind of relationship we do have, and not only that, even the course materials, even if you look at the way the course materials are designed in a way, the course, let's say Shakespearean English, Chaucer's English is introduced. We do not use Shakespearean English or Chaucer's English, especially today when we speak, but we are reading it. There is a need of it, let's say. Yeah, there is a need. If you are an advanced learner, then there is a need. Okay, so as a communicator, we need to gain how we can negate troublesome differences, how we can leverage useful similarities between the cultures, whichever the cultures we are talking about. So we can bridge the gap. So our task as communicators is to push the line to the right sufficiently to achieve an effective culture gap for communication, you see. So our task is something like the differences, so that we can reduce the differences, whichever the cultural gap we have. So if it is large, we can try to make it small, so that many too, we can bring it to few or minor gaps and all. Then we can communicate effectively, and we can be a communicator. Okay. So another thing is that, let's say when you are learning a second language, or whichever the language for that matter, English and all. So appreciation of the target culture. Let's see, if I'm learning Assamese, I have to have that kind of attitude that I do appreciate the target culture. And there is a kind of social and psychological factors that are also involved: the attitude, aptitude, and motivation. Attitude, let's say, what kind of attitude I do have for that particular language, So attitude, whether it's a positive attitude or it's a negative attitude. Aptitude for myself, let's say, whether I am intelligent enough to learn the language or not. Even motivation, what kind of motivation I do have once I learn the language, whether I will get a job or not. So there are different kind of factors are there when you're learning a second language, So these are things. So once we have, let's say, a sound appreciation of the target culture, know how to recognize and negate differences, and know how to identify and leverage similarities, we're ready to set our communication techniques in the right framework to successfully bridge the cultural communication gap. Okay, so and this is where different people have different kind of motivation. As I told you that Gardner and Lambert talked about instrumental motivation, and another is integrative motivation. So some people learn second language for the sake of better education, better job opportunities. But some people, they learn the second language so they want to be part of the community for that matter. You see, so you may have different kind of motivation. So for us, for many of us, it's basically it's a kind of instrumental motivation. But if you have integrative motivation, definitely your language learning skill, and you could communicate effectively, because your kind of motivation is totally different, you see. And And so the effective communication, so these are some of the things. So the sender must convey clearly and concisely what is to be conveyed. The receiver must be alert and be open to receiving two messages at the same time. Simple and straightforward. One has to be simple as well as forward. Do not use that kind of heavy loaded words or sentences, or the vocabulary for that matter. Objective in presentation, you have to be objective, not that much subjective, systematic and logical. Relevant and timely. I was talking about crisis medicines, so relevant, you have to speak relevant to the topic, open to act on feedback received. If there is any feedback, you have to be open and open-minded. The language should be suitable and easily understood by the receiver, and language, it has to be also suitable, And so let's say somewhere after this lecture, somebody asked me a question, and I do not want to listen to that person, and I simply said, yeah, I am an expert, so take my word for it. That means I am not an effective communicator. In a way, I can say, if you want to more about this, here are some references or something like that, So I have to speak in a different manner. It's not like that I am an expert, so whatever I am saying, this is fine, take for it. So I won't be an effective communicator. So we need to, so this is the way we have always done it. Let's say someone says, this is the way we have always done it. So again, there would be a problem, you see. So, so somehow, let's say crowbar 2 is more helpful in compared to crowbar 1 and crowbar 3. And we all know, so which expression to choose and when to choose. Make choices of appropriate expressions. For example, inviting someone for dinner. So let's see, for inviting someone for dinner, I would like to invite you to the conference dinner. Do please come to the conference dinner. Hi, join us for the conference dinner. So this is the same thing. Let's say I'm just saying it in 3 different manner. So I would like to invite you to the conference dinner is basically the formal one. And to some extent, do please come to the conference dinner. Again, it's a kind of not formal basically. Hi, join us for the conference dinner. So you need to know the context. Whom are you talking? Let's say. So I would like to invite you to the conference dinner is basically the formal one, and the choice for a specific expression depend on the relations or occasions such as formal, informal, polite, familiar or casual. So what kind of conversation we are talking about, whether it's a formal, polite conversation, familiar. So all these things we need to know, and communicative language teaching methods as I was talking about. So I'll take 5 minutes more and then wind up. So the CLT approaches offers this information and makes it easy for a learner to make choices of appropriate expressions. And so what are the special expression one need to be careful about? Let's say, who are the participants in the conversation? We need to know what is to be said, how it is to be said, in what context of the situation can be used, you see. So these are some of the factors. Let's say formal, good morning, how are you? Or how are you, sir or madam? But if it's a, let's say, informal situation, you, somewhere informal with friends, good morning, hi, how's life, hey, what's up, it's fine. So you need to know all that kind of differences, okay? And so how to develop the feel to say the right thing at the right time, and so you need to apply your prior knowledge and general social sense of what is formal and what is informal. If you're listening or talking to a person, observe him or her, try to follow her lead. And if they use formal language, for example, if somebody uses formal language, to try to use the formal language, and if somebody is using informal, it's up to you. So you will develop the feel for the right thing, okay, at the right time, apart from the classroom learning, teaching and guidelines of your host teachers, okay. So these are some of the things, and so what we have learned so far, and lessons from linguistics and language sciences. Some of the things, so mainly I talked about competence, and from that competence you can understand that I was talking about communicative competence development, and then discursive competence, and how these things are useful, especially linguistics, and not really linguistics in the second language teaching, how to communicate effectively, okay. So these are the things I mainly discussed. So our understanding mainly and communicative language teaching also focused on to some extent the spoken part, and even linguistic understanding also. Speech is primary in our case, and writing is secondary. Language is dynamic, and try to understand that the kind of language today we are using, after 100 years or after 200 years, languages will change. So language is dynamic, so that's what I'm talking about. Even if you're a college teacher or university teacher for that matter, So if you're introducing Shakespearean text, it's good. It's for the advanced learner. But if your course is something like designed for spoken English, maybe you can introduce Shakespearean English later on. Okay. So because language changes, that kind of Shakespearean English will be very difficult to digest or understand or comprehend for that matter. And other thing is like our understanding, linguistic understanding, is that we do not go for the prescriptive rules. There are many rules, let's say, which is used in English and many languages, but those rules are not used mainly in our written communication. Let's say it is me or it is I for that matter. Many of us use, and many British speakers, they also use it is me. But prescriptive grammar rules will say that it is me is ungrammatical. Somebody is writing it is so it's basically it should be it is I. So there are many rules. Never end a sentence with preposition and all. So our understanding is basically descriptive grammar. From that perspective, we look into language, and from that perspective, we try to develop our post materials and all. Okay, so this is where. And as I was telling you that the kind of Indian English, the kind of variety we are talking about, so the earlier it is the British variety, and because of the global power now, let's say shifted to USA, so many people are learning, let's say, the US variety, American variety of English, and Indian variety is also different, let's say. So our variety, whichever the variety, English variety we are talking about, it has its own grammatical, lexical and phonological forms. It has developed its own varietal characteristics through the interaction of Indian languages and social behaviors with those of English, let's say. So as I was talking about Benglish, Tamilish, English and all other kind of things, okay. So and in Indian English, you will see that there are lots of port mixing, port switching and lots of words also we do use in Indian English, whether it's lathi charge, urban noxels, tukre gang, auto rickshaw, roti maker, black money, gobar gas, demonetization. There are many words for that matter, you see, especially it's typically used in Indian English and all, okay. And so the last thing is that, especially if you want to communicate effectively, so what are the things I discussed or talked about? So let's say my suggestion would be cool, do not hesitate and speak the language with confidence. Do not hesitate for that matter. So try to speak with confidence. Even if you make mistakes, speak the language. Try to speak the language because we all do make mistakes, but do not make the same mistakes again and again. So it's good to make mistakes, but one piece of instruction: do not commit the same mistakes again and again. Okay? Language learning is a temporary and time-bound program, but language development is unending and continuous improvement program. So language learning, whatever the language learning, it's temporary program. But talking about the language development, it's an unending program. You see. So the happy learning, whichever the language you are learning, and please keep in mind, wherever you are or whatever you do, language makes a difference. So whichever the language you speak, language makes a difference, because language is also our identity marker, and there are many other social factors are associated with language. It's not only the linguistic structures, so we need to know those social factors as well. Okay, so with this, I think I'll end my talk, and this is the reference. There are many books, so this is the reference part, and so thank you all for listening with your patience, and I hope I could do some kind of justice to your expectation. And so namaste, namaskar, namaskaram. Thank you so much for listening and for your patience. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Madhab Ray. It's a wonderful talk, and even I have a very little knowledge on this language and linguistics. I learned so many things from your lecture also. Sir, really good to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for the invitation.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Madhab Ray, for your wonderful and very engaging talk. Hello. Hello.
We can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. So now, it's time for interaction. So I request the participants, if you have any queries and the questions and queries, please raise your hands. Then we'll be able to so dear participants, then we'll be able to take your questions.
Yes.
Hello. Yes. Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, audible, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome, sir. Yes, Dr. L.G. Patil, sir. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Yes, yes. Thank you. It's very wonderful. It's a very comprehensive deliberation on this issue. And Mr. Ray has touched all the aspects that are related to communication, starting with the 20th century linguists like Sassour and Hines and Halliday and Wilkins, with some comments from Aristotle and others. And he has touched on grammatical aspect and then communicative aspect, touched to pragmatics and even the new issues that have come in. One of the important aspects of communication is again the competence. So the competence at the level of a person is very important. What is your opinion about it? Because some people are unable to communicate effectively, whereas some people are, or they have inborn capacity to communicate, whatever the language. And we see that that aspect in, say, personal life, family life, social life, even in politics also. Some politicians, as you know, are very effective in speech and they have won the elections, and so they are impressive over the others. So how would you account for this? You talked about all linguistic and cultural other aspects. So how do you rate it?
Thank you, sir, so much, Dr. L.G. Patil, sir. And so, sir, I think you are aware of some of the terms which are being used, let's say, especially for second language, and the layman's term is being used, introvert and extrovert, you know. And we understand that there are people like introvert, they may not learn the language quickly, but the extrovert, let's say, who are communicating, let's say, interacting with people, they can learn the language, you know. So this is the layman's term people they use, and but we had seen that it's not necessarily that introverts are not good, you know, like not good language learners. Introverts could be also very good language learners, you know, and there are some cases we had seen, sir, especially, the kind of phrases, the kind of sentences being used, that some people can easily pick up languages, you know, whether it is, they can easily speak 4 or 5 languages. Yes, I had seen that. There are many people, they can easily, let's say, learn or whichever the languages, 2 or 3 languages. There are certain aspects are there, no doubt. The aptitude, the factor. The intelligence does matter, sir. Intelligence does matter. But along with intelligence, for that matter, let's say I'll quote Pablo Picasso, and Picasso says that intelligence, what is intelligence? Intelligence is to some extent 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, the hard work, you know. Yeah. So what saying that, you know, so what happens is that you have to have that kind of right level of motivation for the same time, you know, right level of motivation, and also not only motivation, let's say, what kind of motivation? I was talking about instrumental motivation. I was talking about, let's say, integrative motivation. So let's say there are many people who they got job either in USA or in France and other countries, for that matter, Canada and other countries. So it is for them, it's not only instrumental motivation, it is for them, it's an integrative motivation, because they have to be part of the community, whichever the community they have, because they have moved out from India or from the respective lands to those respective countries. So their motivations are different. So so language learning, it's sir, it's not an easy, simple factor to some extent. We cannot say this. So the kind of let's say generalization, we cannot make generalization, you know. There, and you're exactly right when you are saying that there are some politicians. I know that there are very good politicians, there are very good orators, but we are not sure those orators, when it comes to writing, they may not be good at writing, sir, in my understanding, because I had seen that from my limited experience in teaching, let's say, for more than 12 to 13 years, I can tell you, in the class, there are many students, they interact and they speak really good manner. But when it comes to writing, they cannot write properly, and that's what I asked those students, that what happened when you interact as if like you know all these things when it comes to writing. So when you talk about language teaching here, and I was talking about the full language skills, and it's not only about the spoken language, it at the same time speaking, listening, reading and writing. So it is a full package, Dr. L.G. Patil. So I think, and
one more issue. I mean, nowadays in India, we are rather sad and unhappy about socio-political situation when people are attacking each other by taking their words, misunderstanding, misinterpreting, or say intentional strategies used, some kind of strategies used by the people. So what as linguists or say teachers of language can we do? What is the role for us?
Okay, sir. For these things, there are many things, let's say, happening as a researcher. Let's say my understanding as a researcher would be, we try to be neutral. If you want to be really a good academician, yeah, definitely the perspectives come into picture. When you write an article, when you write whatever, with the newspaper article or your own article, there are perspectives comes. But somehow it's basically trying to observe, and based on the data, whatever the data we do have, and then we try to generalize these things, So the socio-political scenario, let's say, for us, let's say I myself work on this area of discourse analysis. So discourse analysis is a huge, totally different field, let's say, for that matter. We try to look at newspapers and let's say another kind of genre for that matter. So, so our understanding try to look at following certain perspective, which is the theoretical perspective, and try to generalize or try to make hypothesis accordingly. So the socio-political, the kind of tensions or the scenario, whatever we have been witnessing this day or maybe long back also, it's not a new kind of thing, sir, in my understanding. It has been there, and it has been there long before, and still it will exist, and also it will exist in the future. Because the kind of discourse which has been created, let's say, and we try to look at things at times from others, from our own perspective. We don't try to look at things from, let's say, their perspective. So the concept of other, let's say, other has to be also looked at. That's what Gayatri Chakrabarti speaks about. Can the subaltern speak and all. So whole subaltern literature, if you look at, sir, for that matter, you see. So you have a different kind of understanding in the subaltern history and all. So so the tension is definitely there. So this regime tension is there. The earlier regime, there is a different kind of tensions. So so it's an ongoing battle, sir, in my understanding, and it will go on. An academician, in my understanding, at least from the neutral perspective, at times from the other's perspective, we'll have to look at things, in my understanding, sir. Thank you, sir, for this question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Wish to have more interaction later on. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. L.G. Patil was my PG teacher in Pune, and Dr. L.G. Patil was a dynamic teacher. He used to teach us criticism and other issues. So, sir is now. So I requested sir to join our program, and he accepted my request. Thank you, sir, for being with us digitally, and looking forward to your interaction in future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sir, I'll contact you once the seminar is over. I'll get the contact number of you, and then maybe in future we can also discuss.
Yeah, sure, sir. Sure, sir. I would like to speak to you.
So here, because I would like to point out one thing here. Dr. Ray, he mentioned that cross-cultural understanding is required for effective communication. And as L.G. Patil sir has pointed out, that cross-cultural understanding, we know it, but cross-cultural, because some political perspectives make some hurdle in making effective communication. So these things there, and I'd like to share one my idea that how if there is any gap of communication, gap of understanding as far as culture is concerned, how communication communication fails. One example I would like to say, I would add to Dr. Ray, that once a Thai student in Britain reported not being able to make out what her hostess meant when she asked, "Which day of the week would you like to have bath?" The student understood every word her hostess said, but could not figure out the meaning implied in her question. The notion of having a day fixed for a bath had no reference in her mind, since she had been from a water-oriented culture, where one could take bath as frequently as one wanted. The gap in communication occurred due to the fact that the Thai student was not acquainted with the life, such as hygiene habit of the people from the culture she was to live in. So Dr. Rai has rightly pointed out that if you do not know, if you do not understand each other's culture, our communication miserably fails. So thank you, Dr. Ray, for this one invigorating research talk. So I request any other participants, if you have any queries and questions, please, you can put your questions.
Dr. A has touched all the aspects. I think listeners have no question at all left, because I have been teaching these issues differently. So this is a very comprehensive analysis of all the aspects, almost all the aspects within linguistics and communication.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for your comments. And
yes. Any question?
Positive
participant, please unmute your mic and speak. It will be better to communicate, because this is communication.
And communication is not only one way, it's a two-way process also, as I already told you. So
we have another question from one of my colleagues.
Please, sir.
Dr. Ray. He says that kindly put some light on the importance of language labs in learning English language in colleges. How to manage without them?
Okay. See, this is really interesting, and I can talk about the whole history and the tradition of language teaching. And so what happened earlier, grammar translation method was there. So what happened, grammar translation method did not demand any native language teacher. Okay, so native language, let's say anybody can teach English, whether you are Indian or you are Bangladeshi or whoever, anybody can teach English for that matter, or any second language. Then what happened, what happened, the audiolingual method was developed later on. So audiolingual, the word itself, you can understand audiolingual. So there is a lab culture was developed way back in the USA, in the Europe, London and other places, Great Britain and all. So what happened there, so the purpose of the focus was that, okay, so even the native teachers are not there, we can have those tape recorders, those cassettes and all. I think many of us have been trained in that manner. Nowadays, it's a age of, to some extent, this whatever internet and all. Earlier, if you remember, this cassette and recorder and all, so different lesson and all. So I remember as a student also, I had to spend, or we had to spend lots of time in the language lab. Okay, so and somehow, and then after we look at after 1990s or 2000, what happened slowly and gradually. Communicative language teaching methods were introduced after 1970s, 80s. In India, it took place a little later. So the language lab culture, what one of your colleagues, she or he is asking about this language lab culture. So related to the language lab, I can tell you, let's say the place like JNU, we have pretty good language lab, and Professor Riji Patel sir also agree with, to some extent, let's say in Pune University and other places also, very different central universities and all. So language lab culture is there, and especially we are teaching foreign languages, we need to have that language lab culture. So why language lab? Because see, it's a compact room, it's a soundproof room also, and and to some extent all this audio and visual things, and you can also hear how you sound, let's say. And so as a result, talking about our, let's say, JNU culture, even if I say that we have a whole, it's a big building for language lab, you know, more than let's say 15 or 20 rooms are there, and each and every department has a small 1 or 2 rooms for language lab. Let's say in my center also we have a phonetic lab because we are talking about phonetics, different sounds and all. So we need to have like whether it's a phonetic lab or language lab, we need to have that lab culture. I totally agree. And to some extent in colleges and in many places, you see what is happening, that the infrastructure in government colleges, I should not criticize in a way, but let's see, this is the reality. We know that, you know, how colleges and different, whether it's a private college or how it does function. So to some extent, we do not have this language lab culture. We should have language lab in different, whether it is a state university should adopt language lab, as well as the colleges which should have language lab, especially language courses. But one of the good thing, and talking about the technological advancement, in my understanding, because it's a simple mobile nowadays, if you talk about mobile thing and all, mobile or whatever the laptop or gadget you do have, so if you really motivated enough that yes, I want to learn this language or that language, and confine yourself, that for many hours of that kind of drills, pattern practices and all, using your devices and all, so there is a different computer assisted language learning, what we call CUL, computer assisted language learning. CUL is there, and different softwares are there. There are different language, let's say in YouTube also, you will find many programs, recorded things and all. So it is really good also. The college should definitely establish, but at the same time, you have to be well motivated, because the kind of culture, the kind of experience and knowledge today's learners, what they are getting, before 20 years or let's say 30 years, we did not have that kind of culture, that kind of knowledge. Okay, so yeah, but whatever YouTube and other things are there, language lab should be there in a particular department or in a particular university, a language department, in my understanding. Okay.
Yeah, I have an observation about this. You said that, well, we have in many colleges there are language labs. We had that audio tape, magnetic tape, that lab with 12 units. We replaced it by CALL, Computer Assisted Language Lab. Till I was there, I could motivate the students, and then we could make the students use that. The problem is with the teacher and the students. They should be very active, proactive. That is very important. The technology works, no doubt, but sometimes there are technical problems, no doubt, because so many students go on using it, so technical hunches are there. I have said that I was in CIFL, and T. Balasubramanian, Dhamija and Seti were my teachers. They were so active that they used to take us and sit in the lab for 3 hours every day during that particular session of, say, a week or 2 weeks. So this proactive attitude is necessary when establishing language lab. I would suggest nowadays it is essential for all the colleges while going online. So establishing a studio, small studio is important. A speaker is necessary, or 2 speakers for the students. Make them speak, make them talk, form the groups, and make them go for, say, small speeches for maybe 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes, or say group discussion. So this kind of interactive activity is necessary. As you suggested, on mobile or internet, there are a lot of spoken English courses available. They are free also. MOOC courses are there, so they can be accessed, and students should be made to go for that and practice it. So it is the proactive attitude of the teacher that is very important. That plays an important role. Yes.
That's true, sir. That's true. Yeah, so the role of teacher really important, sir. Let's say.
He is not a teacher. Teacher's role is corrector's role.
Yeah.
Corrections. You should identify the mistakes and corrections. If he goes on using a very soft language, what do you call it? Say simply talking about the student as a good student, excellent, etc. You are hiding the mistakes of the students. You should identify the mistakes, and that is not done by the student, by the teachers nowadays, because such teacher is never called as a good teacher. That is a very bad aspect of it.
Now,
So,
the other aspect is also, if you talk about the size of the classrooms, also it does matter. Let's say
that matters.
especially communicative language teaching methods, and especially Indian classrooms are full with students. More than 50 or more than 60, or even if it is more than 30, it is very difficult. One teacher designing class activities and everything for 30 students, and interaction also. You hardly get, let's say, half an hour or maybe 1 hour. And how many students you are going to interact also. So it's for a small classroom activity, it's very good. So that's what, what happens that, still that's what in India and many third world countries, people are still going for this grammar translation method. Grammar translation method is bad because there is less of loads or, hard work for the teachers, The teacher is giving kind of grammatical rules and instructions, and students have to follow it, accordingly and all. So that's what, so it's really, it's a kind of
challenging,
challenging,
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for interaction.
Thank you, sir. Now we have another question. From the participant. Question is, how could one possibly negotiate Austin's Speech Act theory with Derrida's argument that finality of meaning cannot quite be achieved since language is inherently fluid and unstable?
Okay. See, so it's Derrida, when you talk about Derrida and his deconstruction, that's a different kind of thing, you see. So the author is dead, author is no more. Even the text which is being translated to another language is a different kind of text, And so the text is also dead, the author is also dead, And that's what happened if we talk about translation in general, from source language to target language, whichever the target language you are translating, you are getting a different kind of text. And that's what, every culture is different, every culture is different. You understand that, Rabindranath Tagore, when he himself was translating Gitanjali from Bangla to English, he had a very hard time trying to understand that he himself is the author. And I can tell you also, I have written short stories, and also one of my novels is out, let's say in Rajbanshi, and I'm trying to translate those in English. And also I'm a pretty good speaker of Hindi to some extent. Let's say I've been here for many years. And now if you tell me to translate either in Hindi or in Rajbanshi, especially the Rajbanshi text to, let's say in English, I was like, even looking at the title itself, the title of my collection of short stories, I had, let's say, spent more than 10 or 12 days to get an equivalent word. So the argument behind this, the meaning part, with what you were talking about, the meaning is not constant. Meaning is, it's basically, meaning is being negotiated. And what is being said, let's say, even in the lecture, what the lecture I am delivering, maybe the way I try to convey the meaning, I'm sure that many people must have conveyed, let's say, interpreted or kind of understood the meaning maybe in a different manner. So the fluidity pictures, what is being said, let's say the meaning. So there are different kind of meanings, associative meanings we talk about. Let's say, I can give you one simple example. Let's say the word needle. For one person, the word needle could be simple. It's a kind of instrument, needle. But maybe it's an injection. For another person, it could be associated with blood or some other kind of things. Maybe it's associated with cry or something else. So meaning, the kind of fluidity things what we are talking about. So the true meaning, the actual meaning. So we do negotiate. So the interlocutors and the speakers do negotiate, and this negotiations is always taking place in our daily discourse, daily day-to-day conversation. Now, talking about the Austin's argument, Austin's is talking about mainly the Speech Act, the kind of Speech Act. So, try to understand that there are three things happening side by side. One is the literal meaning. Yes, literal meaning, mostly in our daily understanding, most of us use the literal meaning. Let's say, if I do a rough survey, most of us in our daily life try to convey the literal meaning, let's say. Out of 100%, let's say maybe 80% or 85% we try to convey with our literal meaning. But in addition to literal meaning, there is something else. So let's say idioms and proverbs and the contextual things, what you are talking about, locutionary and illocutionary. So illocutionary meaning is very much there. That is where we need to look at the pragmatics. So I was giving example, let's say it is hot in here. So it is hot in, and there are many other things. We understand that. So, and the meaning is being negotiated. So whatever the linguistic structure, the grammatical structure, the same grammatical structure, maybe it is totally different in another context, in another culture for that matter. It may be totally different. Okay. So, and the parlocutionary things, let's say, and that's what something like many Japanese speakers, you will see that if they're sending an email, so they will say that, yeah, sizzling greetings from Tokyo. In our email, we do write this, all that kind of namaskar, namaste, greetings of the day. But somehow, let's say in US and other kind of email communication I'm talking about, they do not write. They rather look at it's a kind of aberrations from the standard English norms. But for us, something like if we do not convey it, greetings of the day or sizzling weather from, Tokyo or something, and even many Muslim speakers, many times they use inshallah. We also use array and all that kind of things, So the cultural factors definitely come. So that's what. So we have to negotiate this. So the speakers as well as the interlocutors, the listeners, and so what is being said, let's say, and it may be perceived by others in a different manner. And let's say what I wanted to convey, I'm not sure. The way I wanted to convey, you got the right thing in the right manner. I do not know. Because you had seen the world in a different world, and I had also seen the world, let's say, perceive the world in a different world. So again, coming back to the whole understanding, this, especially the linguistic understanding of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, language and culture, whether culture influences language or language influences culture, so other way around. So linguistic determinism, the kind of things we're talking about in a different way, So it's a whole philosophical thing, we can have another lecture on that issue, we can go on and on. Thank you for the question anyway.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In this connection, I remember one thing. There was a very strong interaction between Derrida and Austin on the other side, Searle and Austin. So during 1970s, so around 70-71, so there was an article written by Derrida. There was strong reaction by these people, pragmaticians. Again, Derrida responded to it, and you know how Derrida and these people were very aggressive about each other. So they called criticism as criticism incorporation. So and Derrida's meaning was that meaning is always postponed, never fixed, never final.
That's
the impossibility of finite meaning.
Yes, sir.
He used this word. There is a possibility of this impossibility. He was like that. And, these people talked of real things about, say, real language use. So CP and DP and theory. And so the context matters. And after Roland Barthes, it is the depth of the author, it is the reader, the interpreter. When you speak, how does the other person take is very important. So how does he take? And so all those linguistic as well as extra linguistic factors come into play. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So, sir, that's the reason, is especially, let's say, the translation part, if we talk about especially the machine translation.
Yes.
So why machine translation is not successful? Because it cannot look into the context.
Yes,
And
yes.
it cannot negotiate the meaning for that matter, you know. So, yeah.
Hello. Today, actually, we did not have our honorable patron sir among us in the inaugural session. So I'd like to inform you all that our honorable patron, Deputy Commissioner of Karimganj district, he was having a virtual conference with the Honorable Chief Minister of Assam at the same time. And so he could not grace us by his digital presence. So it's our, we express our regret that patron couldn't come. So anyway, we'll go ahead. Dr. Dibakar Maut, you are co-host. You can, if you have questions, please you can ask the questions. Yeah, please unmute yourself. Dr. Dibakar Maut. Okay, he has already given his questions. So any other participants, please, if you have any queries, we can take. And we are having a lot of okay, we have passed a lot of time. So if you have any questions and queries, please, participants, please put your questions in the Dropbox, or you can ask directly. I think we don't have questions, queries from our participants.
Surojit sir.
Then we can go ahead. Yes.
Surojit sir, Rajiv here.
Yes, yes.
One participant is clear SOP. She was, the participant raised her hand for a long time, so you can allow her.
So what is his name?
Cliff SOP. Are you there, Cliff SOP?
Hello?
Yeah, you can raise your question now.
Okay. Good evening, sir. Sir, my question is for sir. You have said that to fully understand or to be fluent in English, you have to understand the culture. So my question is, sir, in country like ours, especially when I'm from a tribal community, so we're not really taught our own mother tongue. So when we're trying to understand someone else's culture, let's say English, so we're sometimes, it's not sometimes, but it's like kind of a reality that we are very much influenced by the West. So in a way, when we're trying to learn that language, we sometimes lost our own identity in a sense. So sir, I just want to hear your comment on that, because you said that most of us are fluent. Most of us are very supposed to be fluent in our own mother tongue, but we're not. So while learning that, so how, and it's kind of, and then there's also another thing that you have said about confidence while trying to communicate. I think was in your first slide. So how to practice that? Just confidence, as in, can you broaden that term, like how to actually do that?
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Clear Tisopi, thank you, very much for this question. I must tell you that this is the real scenario, and it's not only in Assam or in, let's say, Northeast India, and in many tribal communities in India, and it's not only in India also. Even if we talk about, USA, There are different American Indian languages in Germany, in Australia and all. There are different Aboriginal languages. Because the mainstream language, which was the mainstream language, whether it's English, it is being imposed to those native people. So native people, as a result, something, so their own language, culture, somewhere in the verge of extinction, and this is the reality. And so many people that blame that English is the killer language. In my understanding, it's not. English to some extent in many state languages, for that matter. If you talk about India's perspective, let's say if you are from Assam, what is happening in Assam is that Assam being the let's say state language there, and also one of the scheduled languages, what is happening is that it is being there. It's kind of mother tongue, school in the colleges and all. And we know that Assam is also the hotspot from linguistic diversity. So most of the Tibeto-Burman languages, and even Indo-Aryan languages we do have. So as a result, when Assamese is being imposed to other tribal communities or other language communities, as a result, I truly, understand your feeling and the kind of fear, anxieties that maybe your own language, your own culture, so you may lose it one day, and it's happening. Let's say in Bengal also the same thing, So, and as a result, people come in the forefront. There are lots of politics is being created. It's not politics basically, in my understanding, because people are actually somehow talking about their rights and all. So let me tell you one thing. The present government, what happened that especially Kishori, if you are aware of that NEP, National Education Policy, one of the good things about National Education Policy is that they're trying to promote this mother tongue education, and whether it's mother tongue or local language or home language and all. So it's a pretty good concept, pretty good idea. But the implementation, how they're going to implement it, that's a different thing. But NEP, it's a kind of promising kind of thing, the kind of, so in my understanding, if you look at NEP 2020, the kind of planning, the present government is doing, so to maintain the diversity and all. So this is happening, somewhere in India. It's not only in Assam, as I told you. So related to the other aspect, let's say, the other aspect to some extent, the confidence factor, as you were saying, and yeah. So now, just let me tell you the UNESCO, United Nations, that the forum and all, So again, so how this languages, why they are, let's say, on the verge of extinction, for that matter. So they have developed different kind of parameters also, and they came up with kind of endangered list and all, So in India, the scenario is totally different. I feel really bad after 1971 census. What happened that there are many languages. Let's say you have less than 10,000 speakers. Even those languages are not being recorded as mother tongue, for that matter. It is simply recorded as other tongues and all. So there is a kind of stepmotherly treatment. Our many native languages or tribal languages or other languages or lesser known languages have received so far. It is a fact. Nobody can deny that. Any linguist listening, that. So less than 10,000. So now, so government, or not only government, our own people have to have that kind of aspirations also. That let's say your language, I do not know what is your mother tongue. Let's say your mother tongue is missing, let's say. Missing is not yet introduced. Let's say missing is being introduced in a school curriculum. Are the parents or the guardians of this family, will they send their children to missing medium school? So that is another question. So there is a different kind of complex scenario. I can tell you, in many cases that somewhere people are demanding that their language should be included in the 8th schedule. So once it is included in the 8th schedule language, and then what happened is that initially they were sending their children to the school medium, and then after that, once it is done, the politics is over, and they were no more sending their children to those So it's really complex kind of scenario, and especially for minority languages or tribal languages, it's a fact. I empathize and for this, because I myself come from that kind of a linguistic minority background, and as a result, let's say even my language is not being introduced in the school curriculum. So there is a fear, there is a danger, and it's a reality for that matter. So your second part of the question, when you talk about the confidence factor, confidence, when I'm saying confidence is basically there are people, let's say, there are different social and psychological factors up there. Social and psychological factors, as if like they may know the rules. Even after that, they are thinking that, oh, if I speak, what my classmates will think, what my teachers will think, what others will think, or this is in Hindi, we say LKK syndrome. LKK syndrome is a log kya kahenge, what people will say, what people will think about me. So there are many people that think in that manner. Let's say even in this platform, many of you may be thinking of asking questions, but you were thinking that, okay, shall I ask this question or not? So if you have something in your mind, some kind of ideas propped up in your mind, please do go ahead. And especially for a spoken language. So if you do not speak, and we all speak, let's say I can't say that, to some extent, we all are good communicators. We need to communicate so that also others understand, like, what is my problem, what is my drawback, and let's say especially in the classroom situation, so your teachers can at least correct you that this is the pronunciation part you are lacking, you have committed mistakes, or maybe this is the grammatical mistakes if you do not speak. So that's what in that level, the kind of social and psychological factors, especially from the psychological factors level, from anxiety level, I was talking about the confidence. You need to speak the language with confidence, Then once you develop it, the kind of anxiety, overcome the anxiety, in my understanding, and you come into, let's say, forefront, and you don't hesitate after that, okay? So, yeah. I think I could answer your queries. Kishori, or what's your name? Click Tishopi. Did I answer your queries?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
It's not the thing.
Sir, no, I was not able to unmute. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have last two questions from the participants. Two questions we have with us. Question number one from Dr. Niruka Angam. She has a question. The question is, in the present scenario, bridging the gap between teacher and students have become all the more challenging in English classes. Sir, can you share any of your hands-on experience to enhance teaching learning process?
Okay. See, so it's really difficult and challenging, especially in the multilingual setting. And in India itself, if you look at India, the kind of multilingual classrooms we do have. And it's not only about source language and the target language. There are many source languages, and let's say the target language is English. So let's say the place like Guwahati, if you're in Guwahati, you will see that maybe there are in the class in Guwahati somewhere speakers of Assamese, not only Assamese, Mising, or even let's say Tibeto-Burman languages, other Tibeto-Burman languages, and Hindi speakers and all. So I can understand that this is really diverse classrooms, and to overcome that diverse classrooms is pretty challenging for the teacher. I totally understand, and that's the role of teachers have increased in such a way, and at times people simply blame the teachers that teachers are not doing their duties well. Some people blame it, that teachers are not doing enough, but the real understanding is that looking at the diverse classrooms, teacher, he or she herself let's say, doesn't know other languages. other languages, let's say you know Assamese, but you do not know Missing, or let's say Nagamese, or let's say Apatani, or whichever, Tai Kadai, you know, all other languages spoken some places. So you do not know. So you do not know whether what kind of things are going on, what kind of interference is going on, transfer is going on, you do not know. Now, especially in the multilingual classroom scenario, and this is the present in your understanding, I will tell you that multilingual classroom scenario, this is the MLE model, multilingual model is being proposed by many people, let's say, and especially in India, it is practiced by this person, Mohanty, Ajit Kumar Mohanty, as well as Minati Panda, and there are many people, and the multilingual MLE model is really successful in to some extent in Odisha. So they are saying that it's not only about one language, the source language. You need to communicate. Even teachers, they could communicate in both the languages for that matter. You see, so the MLE program, and after that there is a kind of intervention phase, and it's pretty good to some extent. You know, MLE. And I hope there are many other states should also implement this MLE model, multilingual education model and all. So the hands-on experience, you know, as you were saying that, especially in the classroom, hands-on experience, especially in the multilingual classroom, to maintain the diversity, I can tell you that, you know, one of the experiences that when I was doing it, let's say, since most of the students, they know the contact language. The contact language, either it could be Hindi, or it could be English, or it could be whichever the contact language for that matter. Let's say in your place is Assamese. Huh? So, in your classroom, there are more than 5 or 6 people, 6 different kind of language and cultural background people are there. To initiate kind of dialogue and discussion among the participants. So what you can do to some extent, develop some kind of new kind of different kind of exercises for that matter. Different kind of exercises in my understanding, let's say, why don't you write a, let's say, poetry? And this is the theme of the poetry. Or let's say, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. How do you translate Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in your mother tongue? And how the person, let's say, translate it. And you can share the experience of these people, you know. So the classroom will be really like kind of, you know, with kind of jovial kind of interactions, and also participation will also go. So it's not only about one language, then the target, the source language I'm talking about, but somehow the lingua franca. So others will also start speaking in his or her mother tongue, let's say, Missing. Someone will also speak in Nagamese. Someone will speak in Apatani, something like that. So we can maintain the diversity, and other people also feel that I am not neglected. My language, my culture is also not neglected in the class. So it's pretty good thing. Just I'm simply giving an idea, whether it's a poetry or let's say some kind of short story, little short story, a few lines about it, you know, you can do. And if you do this practice, you know, and really as a teacher, you'll also enjoy, and students will also like it, because everybody has love for their own culture and for their own language. Okay. Thank you.
So we have the last and the final question. This question is from Dr. Rohit Kumar Roy. The question is, as far as the socio-cultural background of students are concerned, how one should enhance the effective communication among the secondary level learners in relation to second language learning? Dr. Rai.
Question is, could you just repeat the question? Secondary language learners among the second advanced level? Just could you just say once more?
Yes. Once more. Yes. As far as the socio-cultural background of students are concerned, how one should enhance the effective communication among the secondary level learners in relation to second language learning?
Okay. See, the question is basically ambiguous in nature. The second language, what you were saying,
Yes.
that the concept of second language differs. You see, second language, it could be, let's say, it could be English. The second language, it could be Assamese, it could be Bangla, it could be Hindi, it could be anything for that matter. Okay, so rather, let's say, if you say that second language here, let's say English for that matter, then the question can be addressed in a way, and so the advanced learner or intermediate learners, and it depends, it's a pretty complex situation, a scenario, I must tell you. Why is it happening? Let's say, try to understand this, let's say school medium, so government school and private schools. In private schools, you have, what is happening is that mostly they try to introduce English in the very beginning level, government, there are many. And in the government, depending on different states also, not necessarily class 1, and even it is not rigorous. So, and you have a mixed kind of, as I already pointed out, that mixed kind of students group and all, So, how to look at the lesson plan and all, first as a teacher, that's what I will tell you that if it's your classroom, it's a smaller kind of classroom, 15 to 20 classroom, then you can develop your own language teaching methods and methodologies, lesson plans and all. But your lesson is, to some extent, it is more than 200 or 300 or 500. And in India, let's say more than 5 language families are there. And students are from different language families. And again, it's a Herculean task for the teachers. Try to understand that, So you need to jot down things, and from a student's level, let's say, you will have to look at this, okay? Because because there are many things, interesting things that are happening. Let's say you were a speaker of Assamese, and you're trying to learn any tonal language for that matter. Most of the Tibeto-Burman language is tonal language. Maybe it is very difficult for you. Maybe you are in Assam because you are hearing these tonal languages. But to some extent, Hindi speakers learning those tonal languages, maybe it is difficult. And at times we had seen that Indo-Aryan languages, not kind of tonal kind of background. As a result, when they're learning Chinese is again another tonal language, and you have lots of tonal language in Tibeto-Burman language, as I was telling you, So lots of problems, lots of difficulty to come up with one that kind of cure all solution. That this is the way I'm going to do. So as a teacher, you have to invest, you have to give lots of time, trying to plan your lessons and all. Okay, so that's what. Okay.
So we have come to the final stage of this webinar. Now it's the turn for the vote of thanks. So it was very interesting, very invigorating, a very highly interactive session. So I now request Dr. Naran Chandra Gahadras, coordinator of this program. I request Dr. Gahadras to propose a vote of thanks. So welcome, Dr. Gahadras.
Sir, we cannot hear you. You are muted, sir. We cannot hear you.
Okay, sorry, sir. So, thank you, Surajitda. Good evening, everyone present here. Respected Principal Madam of Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, Iraligul, Karimganj, Assam. Honorable Speaker, sir, Dr. Ray, and dear digital participants. It is such an honor for me to get the opportunity to propose a vote of thanks to all the dignitaries. On behalf of the Departments of English of Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay Adarsh Mahavidyalaya and Tangla College, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for your presence to make this webinar a great success. At the very outset, I extend my gratitude to our honorable patron of today's webinar, Sri Khargaswar Pegu sir, Honorable Deputy Commissioner, Karimganj, and President Governing Body Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, Iraligul, Karimganj, Assam. Although sir could not be with us today, but sir's role is very, very instrumental for the success as far as the success of the webinar is concerned. Thank you so much, sir. I'd also like to thank Dr. Jayashree Chakravarti, Principal Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, Iraligul, and Dr. Prasanna Emery, sir, for allowing our department to collaborate with the Department of English, Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, Iraligul. I'd also like to thank our respected speaker, Dr. Madhab Ray, Assistant Professor, Center for Linguistics, JNU, New Delhi, for his insightful talk on bridging the gap for effective communication, perspectives from linguistics and language sciences. I'm sure our students and participants are very much enriched and benefited from your resourceful talk, sir. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank all our digital participants, faculty members from Tangla College and across India, my PhD batchmates, our students, for sparing your valuable time for this national webinar, and to all the faculty members of Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay Adarsh Mahavidyalaya, Iraligul, who are associated with the webinar directly or indirectly. Last but not the least, I would like to express my gratefulness to Mr. Pritibhajan Vyakti, Mr. Debajyoti Bora, Dr. Rajiv Paul, Dr. Chinmay Paul, Mr. Kaustav Datta, Dr. Arnab Bhattacharjee, and Mr. Deborsi Borkotaki for the immense help in myriad ways, be it technical or non-technical. Special thanks to the anchor cum convener, Dr. Surajit Ray and Subhra Ghosh ma'am, for your help and guidance. I, on behalf of the webinar, once again would like to thank each and every one of you for your cooperation, help, and support in making the webinar a great success. Thank you so much. Over to you, Surajit sir.
So now we have come to the close of this program. So I now will conclude our program with the national anthem. So I request our dear student, Miss Riya Dept, to present our national anthem.
Namaskar, sir. Sir, am I audible? Hello, sir.
Yes.
Am I audible?
ও তো তোমার তুমি কমপ্লিট করিও বড় শিখবো।
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, yes, audible, yes.
Namaskar. জনগণ মন অধিনায়ক জয় হে ভারত ভাগ্য বিধাতা পঞ্জাব সিন্ধু গুজরাট দ্রাবিড় বিন্দ হিমাচল যমুনা গঙ্গা উচ্চল জলধি তরঙ্গ তব শুভ নামে তব শুভ আশিস মাঝে গাহে তব জয় গাথা জনগণ মঙ্গলদায়ক জয় হে ভারত ভাগ্য বিধাতা জয় হে জয় হে জয় হে জয় 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 হে। Thank you.
Thank you, Riya Dept, for presenting the national anthem. So, formally, we have come to the close of this webinar. So, once again, thank you all from the core of my heart for your patience to be here on the platform. Thank you all, and looking forward to your active participation in future. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I declare,
Dr. Madhab Ray, sir, I'm really grateful to you, sir.
Ma'am, you're welcome. Once the corona pandemic is over, I hope to see you in person, all of you in person.
I'll be the happiest one, sir. You please come, sir.
Sure,
Your newly established college, which is established in 1st September 2017, sir. It's in budding stage only.
Okay, great. So once it's over, so definitely I'll come to your place and okay, ma'am.
Thank you. You're so actively you were doing all your research work and all. So actually inspired me even. After joining here, sir, as head of the institution, sir, actually I am out of detached from this research work and all.
Yeah, so
your lectures are inspired a lot, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for those kind words.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Wish you a happy and healthy life, sir.
Same to ma'am. Same to. Okay. Bye. 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 Take care. Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.